So hey everyone, I'm back with another video, and in this video I'm also going to talk about a topic that is very heavily discussed but no one tries to understand it deeply and try to understand why does it happen. It is a really interesting phenomena and a lot of people talk about it, and the thing I'm referring to is called the sixth sense. Now, when you hear the word the sixth sense, you would think of something like you have this extra sense that a kind of spidey sense inside of you that lets you understand your environment in a somewhat paranormal way, and that you can detect something bad that could happen to you almost like a gut feeling. So you will hear the phrase thrown out like the sixth sense, and you have some other chambers to your sensory experience and all other things like that. Now, when you go deep and try to break down the sixth sense, you will understand that the classical five senses like touch, hearing, smell, taste, etc., these five senses that we have, that we are all taught in school, these are not the only ones to be included in our body sensory system. There are three other important senses in our bodies that are also part of our overall sensory system. The first one is among the list is proprioception, then we have our vestibular sense, and then we have interoception. Proprioception basically denotes to our body's ability to sense its body position in space. So where my hand is right now, how tilted I am, how straight up upright I am, how leaning back I am, how twisted I am, and what is the overall environment and how my body is positioned relative to it. So it is a very important uh, uh, very important sense, because it gauges the brains and calibrates the brain so it can take the best amount of action and to not engage in any kind of activity that can harm the body. The next sense in the list is vestibular sense. Now, vestibular basically refers to balance. If you remember any diagram of your ear ear canal and its biology from third or fourth grade, then you will remember this structure called the cochlea. Now, it's a snail-like structure deep within your ear, and it is very important for your body's ability to balance itself, for your brain to realize how to basically understand how fast your body is moving so it can calibrate accordingly, so you don't start feeling dizzy or you fall down. Now, it is a really fascinating way the cochlea and the brain work together to create this sense of balance within your body. How just moving your head will change the fluids in your ear, and that change in fluid position will signal your brain how fast your head is moving, rotating, moving forward, moving backward, and how balanced you are overall. So it is a really interesting sense. Now, the next thing in the list is interoception. Now, we have talked about this before in previous videos. Interoception basically refers to your body's internal state, your ability to sense your heartbeat, your breath, your internal feelings, etc. And the brain regions uh, uh, that is heavily involved in this interoception is the insula. Now, insula is a very important brain region because it connects with other important brain regions and makes experiences felt within. Now you can probably guess where we are going. The interoception allows you to feel your inner body based on what is happening, uh, influenced by what is happening in your external environment. So let's move on and talk about the next thing. So First, you need to understand that we cannot prove the sixth sense experimentally, as far as I have researched. You cannot measure the so called sixth sense in a person in a lab environment, nor is there any particular sixth sense organ in your body that we know of so far that triggers this feeling of gut feeling that you internally have that something is not right. So, the question is, how does the brain produce this feeling of sixth sense in the first place? So let's go step by step. First, the raw physical energy from your environment comes into your senses and your brain starts to process it. Now, it gets converted to nerve signals, and the important thing is these signals start to pass through the subcortical layers from the spinal cord into your brain. And after that, now we are going into the real process. There are two important brain regions, the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. Now, the anterior cingulate cortex is important because it monitors conflict in your brain. It matches and track. It detects the mismatches in the predictions that your brain made and the feedback that you get from reality. It detects the mismatch between the two and adjusts itself so the brain can be more aligned into what is actually happening. Now, these two parts, insula, which is responsible for interoception, and anterior cingulate cortex, these work together to create and uh, integrate everything into a map of how everything is right now in the environment. So this is the key hub. Crucially, you need to understand that the information that gets passed to your conscious part of the brain is filtered by the salience network. So, not everything that is happening in your environment gets to your consciousness, co- uh, gets to your conscious control, because this salience network basically works out and calculate what is important. So it keeps what is important based on its neural algorithm and rejects everything that it seems is not important, and the things that are important surface up into your consciousness and you can see them, while the things that were ignored by your brain are not, because so many things are happening in our environment and most of the time we are not aware of them, because if we were aware of everything at the same time, then we will be extremely overwhelmed and it would become impossible to live. So our brain has to prioritize what information and sensory experiences it needs to prioritize, and it does it accordingly. So now the brain has gathered the experience, it has created a map of it, and now it basically tries to predict what happens. This is the We are back to the main point. The brain tries to predict what is going to happen. Now, when your brain made the prediction, and the environment send contradicting information, then there is a mismatch. It fires and it triggers your interoception to think that there is something wrong. So basically, it means that what your brain predicted turned out to be false, and now that feeling of falseness, that your prediction was wrong and that you were wrong, gets converted into internal signal, and you start feeling it in your body, in your heartbeat, in your breath. So it was basically prediction failure. Now, the output isn't verbal thought that if you see someone and they feel that they are not the right person or they feel threatening, then it is a pre-verbal feeling, tightness in the chest, things like that. It is not a verbal feeling. You don't think that the man is threatening. You just feel it internally because how your brain is assigning and organizing all of this information. So all the competition handles behind the scenes and we only get the output of it. We don't look at all the neural competition that was happening behind the scene. We are just focusing on the output. So we have talked about the neuroscience, but what about the philosophy of the sixth sense? Now, these are basically generally split into three camps as far as I have done my research. So the first camp is an obvious camp. It claims that all kinds of sixth sense activity can be explained by ordinary neurobiology and things like proprioception, vestibular sense, and interoception, and there is no need to add another paranormal component into the explanation. Now, the second one, philosophical view, is embodied and phenomenological views. Now, according to this philosophical view, also the sixth sense is not a mystery sense. It is basically there's there the evidence that the body is always ready, understanding a situation before the mind put words to it. Now, the third camp is a bit more open to the idea of uh, non-scientism, that if we cannot observe something, it doesn't mean it's not true. So it is more metaphysical and more open to things like paranormal activity, and maybe it's not the case that the entire human consciousness, human quella, human experience can be reduced to physical processes, and the sixth sense also may have a paranormal or slightly mystical component that we have not discovered yet. Now, separate from what intuition is, philosophers argue about whether it's a legitimate way of knowing anything. Now, is intuition a good way of knowing things at all, or predicting things? Now, sometimes our intuitions are good, but sometimes they might not be accurate, and this inherent inaccurateness of unreliability of intuition is what makes philosophers and other people question that whether we should rely on it at all or not. It could be used as a slight gauge or compass to understand and improve our decisions, but it is not reliable, and we should focus on more hardcore facts instead to make our decisions. So I hope you learned a lot from this video, because I learned a lot from researching this, and hope to see you soon in the next one. See you later.